Welcome, everyone. So audience, humans on the panel, welcome to GMing for Youths. What is GMing? Could one of the panelists just quickly say what GMing is?
Well, I would say the GMing stands for Game Mastering, which you could think of as the host or the referee of any good role-playing game. But Game Mastering also exists in other games like board games. I've game mastered, things like Axis and Allies before, just to make sure that everything runs.
My pronouns. I was a teacher for a long time, so you might pick that energy up a little bit. There are little, 8.5 by 11 brightly colored cards in your row. For the Q&A part, we're going to use those to call on people, so that we don't have to so we can easily see you and see you have a question. Let us start off then. I would like each of our panelists to introduce themselves, give us your name, your preferred pronouns if you like, and a sentence or two about your experience GMing. Darius, you want to get us started?
Oh, sure, please. By all means, I will get us started. I'm Darius. How long we've been GMing is the question, right? I've been doing it since the pandemic, officially GMing since the pandemic, so I'd say about 4 years now. And a lot of my experience comes from kind of what's best described as a happy mess. In the sense that I can't say I plan it all, but I can say I account for the personalities of the people who I play with.
I have, I think, 2 years, and I have a lot of characters and a lot of campaigns going, but yeah, some campaigns are kind of boring, and some are OP.
My name is Ian. I prefer he, him pronouns, and I have been GMing for 3 years. Mainly D&D, but I also enjoy other games like Quiet Year and sort of so I have a lot of experience, in my opinion. I'm sure there are people who have been doing it for as long as I've been alive, so I can't really talk, but yeah.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacob. I have been a game master since 2005. Most recently, I have been working a lot with the Fox Den down in Burnsville. I've been hosting beginner games there as well, where I host for children as young as 12. And I also have had a long-standing relationship with the Chess and Strategy Game Association with Bill Nara. So I do sometimes do some after-school programs. I've taught chess to 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, and I think that's we'll pass to Ken.
I'm Ken Justiniano. I'm probably the oldest of the bunch. I'm 54. I've been GMing since I was 10. Back when, none of my other friends knew what a GM was. So I've had a long stint playing these things. Currently, I should say, I love encouraging and mentoring young gamers into becoming GMs, because being around the table is one thing, running a game gives you a whole different view of what goes on, and it is so empowering. I find it empowering for kids. I will just leave it at that.
That's awesome. Thank you all. And now you all can pop in and talk whenever you feel as moved. The next question I have for you is just what skills have you developed? What skills does it take to be a game master, do you think?
Are we starting with me again? Because if we're starting with me again, if everybody else is okay with that. Do you want to do it? Yeah, please.
I would say a lot of patience, because some of my campaigns turn into anything, like Goofy, Dr. Doofenshmirtz. You need lots of creativity to do them, and also learning how to target players without targeting them.
Was gonna say, at least in my personal experience, a lot of kind of how I handle campaigns can come in one of two ways. It can come from a pre-setup, which to me is kind of like the basis of the world and what your general structure is. And then the other half can come from the characters themselves, which is you have to kind of figure out what parts are going to be the main focus of the campaign and which parts should be separated for each player, at least in my experience.
Personally, I would say you need a lot of improv, because even if you're not you can't plan out everything, right? Like, you could, basically highlight an entire path of where they need to go, tell them everything, and a lot of times the players will decide to, do whatever they want, tell them go this way, and instead they will somehow find a way to fly upwards instead of go the correct way.
Ian's comment on improv and being prepared for any kind of eventuality is something I've seen a lot in my skills, because I jump around the convention circuit. I enjoy playing the same games with new groups of people, and obviously I could put 4 new players for the exact same adventure, and my preparation is identical, but the result will be very different. I suppose my greatest skill, if I was to compliment myself, is that I have no fear of strangers, which is very good for an after-school program or coming to CONvergence or the Continent North or something like that.
Creativity and being able to be flexible. The whole aspect of improv where you say, you just go with it, there's this situation and you keep going. As a DM, when you take on that mentality, the gaming becomes a lot more fun.
Anybody have anything else they want to add about the skills?
I mean, I had another thing, which was just, I agree with like the whole improv thing. I really like that. I like taking that specifically to the character pathways that I mentioned earlier, kind of like letting the chips fall where they may, depending on a character's actions.
Awesome. All right, so who in here has ever been a GM or has thought about being a GM? Okay, cool. Well, I assume you have. So for those folks up here, Darius mentioned planning. Where have you found the most joy in planning campaigns? Share a story if you like.
So basically, we were going to try to kill a kraken in D&D. But Dr. Doofenshmirtz uses a guninator and sees that there's one. And then somebody uses animal friendship.
Yeah, you know what? That's pretty good. If it's okay with the panel, I kind of want to go last, but...
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
I would say one of my most interesting experiences was I was trying to set up a sort of thing where, a bunch of enemies and eggs rain from the sky, right? And I was prepared and everything. I was not expecting one of the players to invent the dwarven stomp dance. Yeah. And they rolled a nat 20, so that entire plan just kind of went out the window. Yeah, that was really interesting.
Earlier before the panel actually got started, Darius was talking about goofy characters, and I told Ken that I had recently done the Code, which is a Call of Cthulhu time traveling adventure, because of Darius's character. And so the planning that I got to do was to organize a sequence of events that were going to happen regardless of what the players had done, because of the time travel paradox that existed. Of course, the players had the opportunity to respond to all these things, and maybe after the adventure is over and they fix the time machine, the sequence will play out differently the second time. But because of the time travel paradox, I was able to control exactly what would happen. So in that example, maybe the first time the Kraken fights the players, and then maybe the second time after they fix the time machine, they make friends with the Kraken, which would have been very interesting to see.
On that same vein, I brought up the fact that I here at CONvergence have been running a game called Simplicity. And Simplicity has been running for over a decade. And a lot of the players that show up have been running characters throughout, steadily through the game. 10 years ago, they started off by a random event that happened, was it 2 years ago? They closed the loop. It went all the way around, and the final event is what caused the beginning event to happen. And everybody just busted out. The person who rolled, in my system, if you roll a 1, it's an epic botch. You get to roll again. He rolled 3 1s in a row. And everybody's like, this is the event. This is what caused this all to end. Everybody walked away from the table laughing and said, this is the end of the game. So that to me was one of the best experiences.
But of course you planned all 3 1s, didn't you?
Oh, as the GM? 90% of this game system is not me, it's them.
I'm pretty sure you just kind of manipulated time.
No,
Or
actually,
they just had a weighted dice.
You're not a doctor, are you?
I think we know.
not in this life.
That's what they all say.
Personally, I guess my favorite one of those moments is I personally take a lot of pleasure in making boss encounters that are related to like characters past, characters present. And there was one of them where I had made this archer whose whole thing was that he was hiding from behind the sun. And he would like fire from halfway across the town and just nail people shot after shot. And he had wings because he was part Arakocra. And so eventually, when it comes down to it, the party kind of like traces him down and they're all after him. And it's this climax where the sun is finally going down, night is shining, and his bow is drawn. One of my party members is a vampire and proceeds to ask me, hey, there's blood in his wings, right? Because he's flying about 30 feet off the ground. They have an ability that lets them, as long as they make contact with that object, drain all the blood from it. Let's just say that boss was essentially one shot. And I now have second phases for obvious reasons.
That was my fault. I mean, that is one of the things I was going to ask you as a follow-up. How do you plan for things when your players either roll 3 1s or throw a nat 20? Do you plan for that? How do you plan for that before the players ever show up?
Improv.
Well, I mean, there's always absolute denial, but when that doesn't work, you can always ask them to reconsider, and if that doesn't work, then, I mean, you're
Stuck with it. And you have to deal with it, or else your world is going to end.
or you just forcibly remove them.
Kill them. No, don't do that.
Real life or in-game?
In real life, kill them. No.
Oh, yeah, like one does.
Yeah. Personally, it's a lot of kind of just going yes, but, or yes, and.
It's supposed to be yes and, but I completely agree.
Well, it's yes and yes, but. There are some things you can say yes and to, and there are some things you can say yes, but to. And you have to determine when the timing is, I feel. I don't think you can ever really make a ruling that completely says, I'm just going to ignore that rule. But I think there's definitely something to be said about, you do that, but the consequence is blank.
You said something right there that is so important. Consequence. You have to allow your characters to be able to be themselves. But as the GM, you get to make the consequences for them behaving like they do. You can have a super overpowered character in your party. The rest of your their party members are going to be the ones that have to deal with the fact that he's overpowered. It's one of the things I love mentoring kids with is using Session 0. Setting up expectations of what you want the party to be. Figuring out what's a happy ending. Then work for the rest of the adventure towards that.
I was gonna say, I always look at the characters and I go, what would be your happiest ending? And how can I take you as far away from that as possible?
As the
Wow.
DM, that's one of the biggest tools that you can use, is ask them, what makes you happy? Then take it away.
Exactly.
But then you give them an epic quest to bring it back so that you keep, like, you know, if they're considering leaving, so that it basically guilt trips them into doing it, right? And if that still doesn't work, well, then do it in real life too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, as a former English teacher, we talk about something called cathexis and catharsis. So you're basically holding on, building tension, that's cathexis, and then catharsis is letting it go. And that's what you have the power to do as the storyteller, as the GM. Cool. What's been most challenging for you as a GM overall? And please speak personally, and especially when you were young. I actually want the adults to start with this one. Thinking back as a young GM, what was the hardest thing for you personally? And then youth respond for what's hard for you now.
For me, the hardest thing was getting into that headspace of saying, okay, back in the day, D&D was basically rather concrete bricks. You had these character types and you could not go beyond those character types. Which was really weird because we were building knights and we were building paladins and we were building all these other things that we didn't know we were building. But we were doing it in an organic way. 3, 4, 5 come out and all of a sudden that's not there anymore. So that whole aspect of the mindset of being able to go, we don't have to really follow the rules, we can have fun with this. And that's, at least for me.
So Ken's just indicated the importance of expectations, and I think several other people have already mentioned that before. That was something that I said very early on in the panel. When I started playing my games at the age of 14 to 15, finding people that were as serious about the game as I was not as easy as probably as these days, because I couldn't find people so easily online and just make a group out of dedicated persons. So attempting to play the game with people I already knew and just trying to introduce my friends to the adventure rather than to go searching for someone that was already committed to wanting the same kind of adventure as I was very challenging. But that's much easier these days. I could go on to Reddit and I could get 50 people that want to sign up for a new pirate adventure. I could go into Discord and get 100 people that want to do a horror game. But when I was 15, trying to get people that want to do a horror adventure in Call of Cthulhu was hard, because I would just be trying to persuade my friends into letting me scare them.
I agree with that, and I'm sure it's easier, but for example with me, I don't necessarily have tools to do that, so it's still hard because I don't have a phone or I don't really go on Reddit, so I am still stuck with my friends, and I feel like personally a problem then is that they go doing, for example, D&D, right? But then a lot of times it gets really goofy, and I only actually managed to get a few campaigns that are more serious, because I feel like sometimes you have to have a serious campaign to have a fun campaign, because if it's just going, of course there's something to be said for something that not so serious, just kind of, have fun, but if it's happening all the time, then, when you're going to play, the quiet year and all you get is just, a bunch of, Clan of Mickey Mouse or something, and sure that's fun once, but later on it's like, I want to do something, a more serious game, because, sometimes for it to be really fun, you have to have the occasional case where it's more serious.
Well, hopefully, Ian, that's going to improve over time. I forget, how old are you?
I am 13.
13, okay, even younger than I was when I got started.
I would say that it's a very balanced. that people like certain characters that you don't want to be in the campaign. If they're OP, then you need OP monsters, but then your team can't deal with them.
OP is
Overpowered.
Thank you.
And you just have to deal with that and just make the monsters target them until they die. But if they have 100 health, it's kind of annoying because they can just heal all of it.
Break their knees. Anyway, balancing is really like a fun one. Balancing how far, like, because I've had people who wanted to write full, like 7-page novels of their characters' backstories, and then I've had people who have been like, I have 1 sentence and this is it. Balancing how much of that to put in personally.
I eat nuggets.
Yeah, no, there'll be like a guy who's like, I was an ancient warrior, descended from a clan of monastic monks born in the hills. And then there's one guy who's just like, I'm a dwarf, I like hills. And I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do with this. The two of you are like, one of you won't give me enough information, and the other one of you gave me 30 pages, and I'm not reading 30 pages. So figuring out how much of that to like balance out and include personally is a big one, along with, you know, the classic D&D thing. Scheduling is my worst nightmare, and if anybody mentions a schedule to me again, I will personally send them to the 9 hells.
Some advice? I've got a questionnaire that's 10 questions. And when you, I mean, even here at CONvergence, it's like, fill out the questions. I need that information from you. And they're really simple, basic stuff. And it's like, by having at least that kind of stuff, you can then focus what you're going to be using.
Do you all have other advice that you would give each other, given the challenges you've just heard? So there's a bit about balancing the backstories.
When it comes to scheduling, I think that is always a challenge, right? You need to be able to have those people who are, you know, easily contactable, and I feel like one of the easiest ways to get scheduling is if you can manage to get like a D&D thing or a Quiet Year or whatever other game you're having, like rolling, like, you know, but just like start out random, and then once you have people engaged, then you can kind of set a solid date, like, you know, every Wednesday, right? And then, you know, hopefully if you get that out far enough, then people will kind of plan around it, and it becomes a lot easier, right? And of course there's some cases where you can't exactly plan around it, but if you can make it, like, for example, oh hey, you know, the activity that I do after school is every Wednesday, I can't really change that, right? But if it's something really important, then, you know, instead of being like, you know, the activity is whenever we can figure it out, you know. So of course it always starts out like that. As for balancing, one way I feel like to make sure that you don't have like one super overpowered character and another character who's not as overpowered is to make sure that the party collaborates when they're actually making their characters, right? And as for the whole like backstory thing, I feel like, you know, sometimes you just have to like set a like maximum and minimum for the backstory. Like, I mean, for example, you could say, oh, I will only read up to 2 pages, so you can write a 30-page, but I'm only going to read 2 of them, so everything else will basically be ignored unless there's something like, come on, it's only two pages, 1 word, yeah.
It's only 2 pages and another 30.
It's only another extra 30 pages.
No.
But, like, for example, say it has to be at least like 5 sentences, but no more than 2 pages, right? Then I feel like you don't get ones that are too long, and you don't get ones that are too short. And if somebody who wants to write a more complex one, maybe you'll read it at any time, but, you know, don't, you know, make sure you have that set so that, you know, it becomes a lot easier.
If you use backstory, just use little bits. Don't use the entire page. And yes, there is backstory with the characters that are acting like that, and you should know that backstory, but you don't need to know their grandma's name.
I think that's very relevant, and I think, like, in some terms, I would agree with that. And as well, I think that there are some terms where, like, you can take things that they've written down and work it in, as irrelevant as it seems. Like, say their grandma's is like a master bakestress, if you need a baker, or if you need someone else. So, like, I would agree with that, and I think there's value in checking in on it and rereading it. And for, like, finding new players, what I always recommend for those who, like, don't use the internet, which honestly is so fair and you're so real, just talk to your friends and kind of work your way through them. A great example is my friend Maxie over there, because I met Maxie, and then I met Anna, and now I've met Kat. And it's kind of like, you'll eventually meet your friends' friends, and your friends' friends' friends, and your friends' 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 friends. And, like, your circle kind of grows in this really, it's not inexplicable, but unexpected way.
Awesome. So this is a good time for this question. One of the things that I've heard from game masters in my life is how about scheduling. Like, that's the base level, but you almost have to, like, take care of your people. Mm-hmm. You have to care for the group. What are some things that you've done over time that have cared for your group?
Can I?
Yeah, go for it.
First thing, two things. One, you're the GM, right? So they need to bring tribute.
Bring me a piglet to split open.
If you want to live through the adventure, bring me something good to eat.
You will feed me a child.
No. Childs are too small.
Oh no, the man.
We need teenagers. They're the good size to eat.
Oh no.
So I don't ever...
Make sure they aren't too skinny.
I never ask for tribute. I never ask the players to bring me anything for different game days. But when we do host Room Quest and I have my cheese platter and my vegetable tray out, I do have a tip jar. But I never ask for anything. But gratuities are appreciated.
No, but the thing is, built it into the culture of the gaming system. I mean, this was when I was in service, when I was in the Army, the group that I would get together with, these are a bunch of jarheads and, you know, guys that are field infantry. And we would get together at one of our friends' houses. Everybody brought a six-pack that he liked. You know, be it Coke, be it, you know, alcohol, be it whatever. You know, everybody brought him something. And everybody brought pizzas. So it's like by the end of the night, it was really funny because everybody would bring one that they liked in a Hawaiian because that's what he liked. By the end of the night, everybody had eaten theirs and he still had like 3 pizzas left. Because, you know, it's like everybody brought him a Hawaiian. So that whole aspect of building the culture around it so that they treat you well. In respect, you have to treat them well. You know, it's like your gamers, you need to listen to your team, to your group. Your job there is to make it fun for them. So, you know, listen to them, listen to what they want to do, and incorporate that into your story. Thanks.
I would say it's also helpful to kind of, at least for me, have a background of what my players have gone through, because there are some topics that, like, generally speaking, I know players have reactions to, and there are moments where you have to be like, okay, we can't do this.
We're going to be doing a panel on that later on. Come, Shaun, come.
What's the
listen.
panel called, Ken?
Introspect, give me 1 second. Someone card thinking here.
But that, and just like understanding that you have to understand your players are people. At the end of the day, they're not just players, they're human beings, and they're your friends. So you don't just have a responsibility of, oh, I have to create this space for them because they're players, but you also have to create a space where you can maintain that and the friendship you share. And that's something that I do through, like, sometimes I just go on wild random adventures with them. Yes, Ken?
Oh, no, the name of the panel is Self Through RPG. And it'll be in it'll be in here at 5. So,
yeah. But I think it's a lot about understanding which topics are, like, really, really good to kind of have as a character and which topics are not. A great example is that, like, a lot of my characters deal with the past in a very interesting way. And there are some campaigns where I have to be like, no, I can't do that because there are people who have stuff around that. And there are people who, like, if I talk about the past in the way that I standardly do, that's not okay. And so I have to come up with something else, and I have to respect that. Because I'm not just a game master in that instance, I am their friend.
And you can't be evil with them. You can't destroy their characters that they spent probably weeks on and just say, I'm sorry, but you died.
I mean, you can be a sadist, but maybe not evil. You can definitely torture them.
But the problem is, there's characters that they want to stay the character, so you have to just gut the character out of them until they stop.
Pain.
Yeah, there's definitely a part of, having fun with them. Like earlier we talked about not giving them a happy ending, but sometimes, occasionally if you want to be a good, GM, right, you need to make sure that you sometimes at least give them a, good ending they want. Otherwise, whenever they come to play with you as the GM, they won't expect anything good out of the adventure and they won't play as well, right? If, and sometimes you can say, keep the bad endings, limited. Otherwise, if you constantly are like, you were so close, but you failed, like always, they're not going to want to have you as the GM, because you're constantly doing that. And like you said, you can't just, you need to know the people and you need to know what's okay, right? So don't do something that somebody will dislike for one reason or another, right? Like what, maybe they are, maybe they just don't like something, right? And say, well, okay, or maybe something happened and they're really sensitive about that, and you just don't include it in your campaigns or your games or whatever your game you're doing.
Almost all of us have emphasized the importance of improv at least 2 or 3 times already in this panel. A hallmark rule of good improv is that you will look good if they look good, which is a simple way of saying that you want yourself and all of your other players to set each other up for success. Whether that involves a 6-pack and Hawaiian pizza, or whether that involves taking care of each other's backstories. An easy way of incorporating all this is just to accept the characterization and the intended depiction that your other players have. I might not be so clever as to come up with a quippy one-liner after I, blew up a car and then just walk away from the explosion. But whatever I say, if you just compliment me for it and say, great speech, I'm very motivated, even if I don't have anything clever to actually say, means that at least you accepted what I was trying to do. And understanding that a player's intentions may not, come out very clearly, or, it could be rough, but they're intentions, and we're here to match each other's intentions.
Always remember, as much as they call you a game master, it is not a one-man show.
No, it's not a one-man show.
Well, the truth is that leaders, as a DM, as a storyteller, you're a leader. Leaders do their best leading from behind, not from in front. And allowing them to actually create the story themselves saves you so much time. Go with what they want to do. Let them lead the way. And you just sit back and you're like, that's cool.
Yeah, no kidding. So think about now the difference. So you've been asked to GM, or you've got a new group that you're GMing for, and you look at them. One of the things that's good to keep in mind is how role players develop over time. How might you treat a first timer differently than somebody who's been playing for years? What's the development of a role player?
I feel like in the beginning, when you have a new person, right, you let them off a little easier if they make a mistake, right? That ends badly. You might even sometimes say, you know what, that's fine, that ended badly. I will let you try again, you know? But if it's an older player and they say I accidentally throw the wrong person off the cliff, you say, well, I'm sorry, but you failed the game, right? But if it's a new person, you might say, you know what, I'll be nice and I'll let you try again, right? But at the same time, there's a certain amount of giving them the experience. You can't just let them retry everything, you know? Like, let's just say in D&D, somebody's, they roll their new person and they roll nat 1, right? And for example, for me, I do, critical hits, critical failures, right? You might let them off a little easy and just say that they failed, but you're not going to do a critical failure, or you might even be really nice and let them roll again. So.
Ian and I were talking earlier about how I can go on Reddit. I have a phone. I have a smartphone in my pocket right now. I could easily find lots of players to play with, but Ian is younger, and that was a struggle for me when I was approximately his age. At Ian's age, I would probably have to do a lot more feeding to find the kinds of players and to cultivate the game that I was looking for. But now that I'm older, I'll have to be doing a lot more weeding. So feeding, by which I mean that you're trying to cultivate and encourage more people to pick up the same hobby and experiment to try to do something new. But now that I'm 30 years old, I already know what I want to do, and I have a clear set in mind for my different games, and it's very easy for me to get lots of people that already agree with me and want to do that exact kind of thing. So now I have to weed, and I have to remove people from those potential games. And just as Ian was indicated about not being so lenient or forgiving for inexperienced players, I don't have a lot of patience for people that are already my age and have been playing for 15 years and should already know better. But I would express a lot more patience when I'm trying to feed, but not when I'm reading.
Here's my question. Were they in acting before? Before they turned to D&D? Because that changes a lot. If they were in drama beforehand, I'm gonna give it to them straight. I'm having faith that you know how to play a character. Call me crazy. I have faith that you understand what becoming a character is, or at least some level of understanding the idea of becoming someone else.
I was never in the musical in high school, but I did run the lighting crew.
Well, we'll take it. I figure your character was the lighting. We'll call it that.
I was a technician.
Has anybody ever had to kick anybody out of a group? What was that like for you?
When I was young, it was hard because you don't want to destroy those kind of relationships. There's somebody who's willing to show up to your games. You don't want to, actually burn a bridge. As an adult, I will kick you out of my table. This is my table, I'm the DM, this is my story. I don't have time for it. If you want to be that antagonizing character that plays against everybody else at the table, I will give you a correction. If you don't take the correction, hammer from God comes flying through the scene and hits you in the back of the head. Oops, your character's gone now.
I have a story about this, if we have time. I don't know if people want to hear it.
It's fun.
There was a friend of mine, we're gonna call him Son. His name is not Son, but we're gonna call him Son. He had a very interesting character, a little bit stereotypical, edgy, kind of like ghost child who was going down the path of darkness. And after a while I was kind of like, I'm not just gonna let you get away with killing people purely for the sake of justice. And he didn't like that. And one thing led to another, and eventually he has a confrontation with a god. And let's just say, interesting things followed, such as, but not limited to, possession and the consequences of his actions.
Yep. Where are we at for time?
We are. I was going to ask a couple more questions and then take some questions about 4:20, something like that. Shaun, go ahead.
Or you could just imitate the souls that he killed until he goes crazy. Good.
I did that version.
Correct.
About
The other
two,
thing I did was just have to make that possess his body.
Go ahead, Jake.
about 2 years ago in a vampire game, when I kicked a player out, this is a backstory story, actually. The character had invented a vampire character that was interested in opening a restaurant, and they would be experimenting and using like different kinds of blood to like make it taste differently. And this is a really interesting concept, but it's not a good idea for a player character because the person would be tied to the restaurant. The litmus test for any good player character is you have to tell me why you transformed from being an interesting NPC into being a player character. This player character was not doing the thing that I needed them to do. They weren't giving me a good backstory. They weren't very polite to other people. So I stopped inviting them, and then I just decided to use their character as an NPC. And the rest of the player characters went to go visit the restaurant anyway because it was a really interesting character, but he doesn't belong in the game.
So your non-player characters are richer for it, I suppose. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy with it, and I didn't invite them back.
Nice. So the skill of storytelling, we talk about it all the time, and sometimes it can get a little intimidating to hear that because it's cool to be into storytelling, but it can also really intimidate folks who want to GM. How do you develop that skill?
Make mistakes. I swear to everything that is holy, if I see another person go, I'm not good at something right away, congratulations. You figured out how hard it is to develop a skill. Making mistakes is part of being human, and it's part of what gets you that skill.
What if I'm not human?
Oh, if you're not human, that sucks. Do it anyway. We're all human. I'm terrified of driving, but I drive consistently, and I'm getting better. It's the same thing with writing. It's the same thing with anything. You make mistakes, you find out, you get better. It's called improvement. It doesn't just come out of thin air.
But that also should be not just for the player, but for the character your players are playing.
Yes, every time.
A real good storyteller will make you live through your growth. The best parts about creating a character, a 0-level character, raising them up to level 10, is the growth that you put that character through. If it comes too easy, the people don't have any invested interest in the game. If you make it hard enough where they're actually working through it, they'll come back to the table every freaking time you call them because they want to keep their character growing.
Strength does not just come from bigger number. Strength comes from change.
Yeah, like some of my favorite campaigns that I have GM'd, for example, in D&D or done other role-playing games, right, have been the cases where you start out people start out with characters, right, just not so good characters, they're not as experienced, right, and if you really keep it going, then in the past, if you reference back to a seemingly small moment, right, and they'll think back and they'll remember it, and they'll be like, oh yeah, that's right, I remember when we did that, and it kind of causes some nostalgia, and it's nice to look back on moments where, say, that one goblin you kicked into orbit comes back down, like level 10.
Awesome.
So.
When you're saying, remembering back on and stuff like that, one thing I do around my table at the end of every session is we go around and we say, what was memorable? You end up with like about a half hour worth of giggles. It's like people like, oh, when you did that, or when you did that, it's great. And it's a really good way of winding down after a good game session.
All right.
Yeah.
That sounds like another way to take care of each other too,
Yeah.
right? To go over that nostalgia. I'm glad you brought that up, Ian. So what other advice would you give to folks in the room, to other middle and high schoolers who might want to be interested in leading a game?
If you're a middle schooler, if you're a high schooler, look to see if your school has a gaming club. If it doesn't, start one. Go up and go talk to your vice principal, whatever, and say, I want to start a group. They have to give you that space. And then just start from there. Find a faculty member that will, sponsor you guys and just go to town. I will share my contact information. You can bring me down to your school, and I will show you how to make games.
I've said it once, I will say it again. Do not be afraid about messing up, or about if something sounds dumb, or if about something sounds incomplete. So many times I have said things that have sounded like that in my head, and players have loved it. I once had a giant snake come out of the water, and I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. My players loved it. My players were like, we get to kill a giant water snake in a casino? Like, they were losing their minds. And I was just like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. But you have to realize what's stupid to one person isn't stupid to another. Mm-hmm. And you also have to realize that, like it or not, some things aren't going to be perfect. Some things you have to make perfect. I completely changed the snake so it was like a relic that had survived underwater wars. And like that I like, but just a giant water snake, I'm not exactly a big fan of. But you have to use what you give yourself, even if it's bad.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to understand too the reverse side. What might sound like the perfect, most ideal idea, like, I don't know, if you're thinking, wow, this gem that gives you the ability to fly, the rest of the party might be like, oh, that's so stupid, it's so unoriginal, right? And, first off, a good party will respect the GM, right? Whether it's in D&D or Energy Quiet Your Walk, because I love the game too, right? But sometimes what you find is a really good idea. Other people might be like, why did you even do that? Or they might be like, well, yeah, that was totally kind of thrown in, which is why sometimes it's nice to have a co-GM actually, like somebody who you can talk to about your ideas, and they might be like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. They might be like, I don't know, right? So it's good to have two opinions on an idea you're thinking about. So, because if you can get two people to like the idea, a lot of the times it's probably a pretty good idea, right? And obviously you're not going to have like 100 co-GMs like stored in your basement or something.
That would be illegal is the problem.
Only if you get caught.
Exactly. It's only illegal if you don't get caught.
Sometimes you get caught and it's still not illegal.
If you're rich enough.
If nobody finds out.
Two.
But the problem is, you need willing participants to be in your basement. Or they won't.
Or just have your co-DM in the party, which is another fun thing. It's always good to have an in-story guy.
All right. So I'm going to ask them one last lightning round question. So those in the audience, if you have a question, think of how you want to phrase it and be ready to ask it. And again, you're going to ask your question by holding up those brightly colored pieces of paper. So the lightning round, as they're prepping their questions, what are 2 to 3 gaming systems that you use all the time or find particularly inspiring to your own work?
Oh, I'm going first? Okay, 5th edition, obviously. I do a lot of custom systems, but I really, why am I blanking on it? I like Altered Carbon, or no, it's Alter 2050, something like that. It's a cyberpunk setting. It's really good with how it handles like chrome and the tolerance for your body. Okay. And then a new one I've been enjoying a lot is, I'm blanking on the name again, but it's like, it's not Fate or something like that, but it's, the whole idea is that you play in like this kind of Fate-ish world, and it's like one of the classes is literally a star cowboy, and that is just like, what? Oh, it might be Lancer, but Lancer is like mad. Icon, that's what it is, Icon, yeah, Icon.
I would say just like, I DM some, but not a ton. I mostly play, my mom is a very good DM.
So is it mostly D&D?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
a lot of D&D.
Awesome. That's great. Is there a particular edition that you've studied or used? Okay.
We're trying like blood magic from like 3rd, I believe.
That sounds great.
I don't know, but I don't know.
Awesome. Ian, how about you?
So this may come as a surprise, but I really like D&D in the quiet year.
Thanks. Why do you like the quiet year?
I just really like the idea of, everyone is a storyteller. You still have a GM, someone who's kind of in charge of the game, helping it through, make sure all the turns are taken and stuff, but it's kind of cool. So if you have a group of people who really like DMing, the quiet year is kind of like, imagine hey, I like the DM, I also like the DM. All right, let's all DM together. So that's kind of how I think of the game.
Nice. Jacob?
I play a lot of RuneQuest. It has the best setting. I use GURPS for FPS stuff like Mass Effect or the Halo role-playing game. Call of Cthulhu is really good for a murder mystery. So too is the World of Darkness. I did a vampire LARP at the Con of the North last year. And if I do it next year, I'm thinking I'm going to do a vampire murder mystery. It'll be fun.
Nice.
I've done a lot of anything in the World of Darkness genre, D&D, till I got bored with it. And then the game system that I created, which is called Simplicity.
Nice.
Which, if you're a kid, I have two-hour sessions that we're going to be running. And that's on Friday and Saturday, 5 to 7.
So they look for simplicity? Is
Simplicity.
That, okay.
If you're an adult, after 10 o'clock, I'll be running Simplicity for Adults up in the gaming, up in gaming.
Nice. Thank you. All right. We're ready for audience questions. Let's get them out. Who's got a CEO? Oh, there we are. Yellow piece of paper, please.
Blank piece of...
Yeah,
Let's...
how do you, format the story so it's both, interactive and still surrounds the characters?
So how do you format the stories so it's both interactive and surrounds the characters, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very, 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 very much something I've done many times. And what I love to do is always get a backstory, but make sure that backstory is after you've told them about the setting and make them fit it into the setting. Because if they just have a backstory before they hear about the setting, then they're not going to make something that fits in at all. But if you make them make something that fits into the setting, then you can shape the setting and their actions.
Another good thing that you can do is, what I always do is I would always ask is for example, I'll have them create the backstory and I'll tell them the settings, right? But then they have to say why their character would be there. And a lot of times I can get some interesting and maybe some backstory development that they didn't think of before, because now they need a reason, right? I do not know why, but a lot of times the reason is for the bar. I don't know why.
I wanted to get Shaun's voice in here too. You had an idea.
I had this campaign once where it was a Sky Turtle-esque for steampunk, and there's a steampunk character, but it was a very odd steampunk campaign, so it was already made, so it was kind of challenging to adapt it, so you should always know the campaign before you make the character, which this character was made a long time ago, and it was a good idea, so it just kind of had to stick in, sort of.
Sorry, Ian, I want to make sure. Did you finish your thought?
I also wanted to say another good idea is to have people tell if you can afford it, afford it, not money-wise, but, have the time to do this, right? Then, you can tell them the story, then you can send them off for a day or a couple days or a week, depending on your schedule, then have them come back with a backstory. This way it gives them a lot of time to work on their backstory, and you usually won't get the whole one sentence, right? If you have the correct group, right? and then afterwards you can then, once you have the backstory, send them off for another time, right? Again, this is only if you are able to do this, right?
Right.
Like, for example, if you have a group of friends who you want to do D&D, like you switch off creating adventures, right?
Right.
Then
It can almost be like a taster session to get them interested. Yeah.
Yeah, and then basically then, you know, when they come back, hopefully you'll have made a way to include their backstory into the story, develop some plot around it, everything. And
Nice.
it is never a good idea to just throw in a character, because why not?
We have time for we have time for a couple more questions and for folks to contribute. So I'm gonna take the next question. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just make one comment? You want
I think we should move on to the next question.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Maybe we can get back to it. We had a blue piece of paper back there.
So, kind of multi-generational, kind of here. I guess I same question, slightly different ways for one side and the other side. Adults. Do you find campaign writing differs when it comes to GMing other folks than it does your adults, your adult campaign?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so the question is, adult folks, do you find it different to run a campaign for young people versus adults?
Definitely, because the type of campaign that I will do for adults is a lot darker, a lot more adult themed, where for kids I will try and keep it lighter, but I will let them direct where they want to go, just like I do with my adults. The aspect here is with adults, they have a tendency of wanting to do things that they can't do in the normal everyday world. Actually, we're going to be having a conversation on that later on. If you want to be doing something for kids, it's not that you have to make it all sunshine and bubblegum, but they have to direct which way they want to go.
Until they turn it into vehicular manslaughter. Then that's when you know it's the good place.
Say that again, Shaun.
When it turns into vehicular manslaughter, you know that's when it's good.
I don't like to change adventures between adults and children. I mentioned earlier that I like running the exact same game multiple times to see the different results. So I've done the Mass Effect game twice, so I'll probably do it again in September or October. And I wouldn't change the preset conditions if I was playing with Ian and company rather than if I was playing with Ken.
Yeah, I know we have just a couple minutes left, but I know you had a part 2.
Question for the kids, youths. Do you hope for anything to change in your campaigns as your players grow in age and experience?
As your players grow in age and experience, are you up for change in your campaigns?
What do you hope to see change as your players grow in age and experience?
Oh, what do you hope to see in your players as they grow?
More murder. Because it's fun. It's just fun torturing them. Just bringing the souls back.
Yes, I feel like there should also be a certain amount of, you know, not having as much murder until older. I mean, I just feel like you really need to know your audience, but one thing is nice is to be able to, and I also don't think it's good to just constantly murder, because then they don't get attached to the character, and then they don't really care as much about the campaign because they just know there's a 50% chance their favorite character will die anyway. So, yeah, just.
I mean, if they murder people, you torture them with the souls that they have inside them. Then you turn them into a voice that the souls speak for them after they murder enough people, but not killing the character, just giving consequences to the killing. So then after they kill stuff.
Absolutely. Got one more question.
Yeah. Awareness that there will always be consequences for anything you do in my games. No deed goes unnoticed by anybody, ever.
All right, we got time for one more question. This green paper.
Trying to
how do you balance pleasing different characters or players?
How do you balance pleasing different characters or players?
Last question.
It's a combination of two things. One, trial and error. It's purely how you get just a lot of stuff done. And two, understanding if that pleasing equates to where the character is in their story. Because there are plenty of characters who want that pleasing, but doesn't fit that narrative in that moment. If not, then they don't get it, and that's tough, but they can't just, there needs to be a reason outside of just they want it.
Yeah, I feel like there's a certain amount of, you want your characters to be happy, like I said earlier. You want to give them the happy ending, but at the same time, you want to make sure that they also feel engaged, right? And not always getting the happy ending keeps them engaged, not always pleasing them, right? Well, making them care about the character by sometimes giving them the ending or the pleasure they want. So you can't always deny them, give them what they ask for, but you can't always say yes. Otherwise, it's not going to be engaging or pleasing.
Thank you.
Right.
Well, actually, it's 4:32, so I have to be done, unfortunately. But if you were particularly drawn to one of these folks up here, please feel free to come up and chat with them. Thank you so much. Let's give a hand to our band.